3, 2, 1.
The year is 2004. George Bush beats John Kerry for his second term in office. The CIA admits that there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The Boston Red Sox win their first World Series ever since 1918. And Mark Zuckerberg opened Facebook to the public to our everlasting shudder. But somewhere in the magical country called Toronto, Canada, Bryan Lee O'Malley released Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life. It's about a 23-year-old slacker loser who stoops to the low of dating a 17-year-old high schooler in order to rebound from a harsh breakup. This correlates into him finding a new fling with a girl named Ramona Flowers, and spirals into a video game-style beat-em-up against all her villainous past crushes looking to control her love life. This is the plot of Scott Pilgrim, and it was the epitome of early 2000s underground pop culture. A space and time when the financial crisis wasn't a thing and college kids could just go out drinking at house parties. The term geek was becoming the trendy topic of the youth, and even the most meek of hobbies could be tantalizing for the right person to gravitate towards. Which is exactly the thing O'Malley wanted to create, a story about dumb and young adults growing up and moving on with the exceptions of our main quote-unquote hero, his love interest, and her 7 evil exes. O'Malley, through unintentional methods, facilitates the importance of responsibility better than any other American comic series, and casts upon our affluent protagonist to be better. Kinda like how Todd from BoJack Horseman best put it.
You can't keep doing this! You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay! You need to be better!
A lot of folks have this idea that Scott is a very bad character and that he does these bad things intentionally and with zero empathy. However, it's nothing of the sort, and even Bryan O'Malley had to kind of spell this out.
Someone said, Brian, why is Scott an asshole? I don't think Scott's an asshole. I think he's a fool. This story is about how you can unintentionally do harm. I mean, that's part of it, for sure.
The influence of Scott Pilgrim has been a staple of nerdy talking points for the better half of our current century, and it can't be understated with all the references and staples it firmly placed itself in.
I could honestly eat it for every meal, or just eat it all the time without even stopping.
You get fat.
No, why would I get fat?
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
It's been a not well kept secret for quite some time, with a box office bomb / cult following from Hot Fuzz director Edgar Wright to a revived Lost Media arcade side-scroller. There is charm and likability to the characters, and the presence of Scott might be seen as a hindrance because of how unlikable he is to people who see it from a certain point of view. So what if a new show comes out with the majority of the movie's cast coming back to reprise their roles, does the unthinkable, take Scott out of the picture, and you're left with a group of people who develop into their better selves. Case in point, Scott goes from protagonist to antagonist. The process of how adaptations are made is a tricky tightrope. I already discussed on several videos before what to do when you make the same piece of film as you redo it in a new ink. What I can presume overall is that you need all flavors of competency to make it work. You don't want to make something without a strong yet passionate underbelly. Otherwise, it will be just as easy for audiences to split open your guts when it goes wrong. Yuck, very messy. Netflix's Scott Pilgrim starts off very much beat by beat like the first few chapters of the Scott Pilgrim comic. It is well aware of the fact that people are looking for their favorite characters to get reintroduced in an anime aesthetic, and so the creators thought it right to disappear the main hero and crash the funeral in song, because f*** you, this is just how Scott Pilgrim does it. In fact, the series feels the need to take the very concept of adaptations by focusing in on locations that mimic its more popular iteration, the movie in this case, into the majority of the plot. From a ghost-written screenplay to an off-Broadway musical, with Scott Pilgrim's likeness starring the guy's supposed killer as him, serving as a bit of fun role reversal, and seeing these larger-than-life actors trying to fill in the shoes of a meek, unimpressive slacker is kind of funny.
About Scott Pilgrim.
I'm Scott Pilgrim.
No, the real Scott Pilgrim.
You saying I'm a fake Scott Pilgrim?
If anything, it's just another drop in the bucket for Scott Pilgrim's more impressive feat of translating well into a variety of mediums. Transmedia. The comic is a good starting point for many folks, and it gravitated towards audience members who were big into the comic book, video game, and anime markets that were picking up steam thanks to pop culture beginning to capitalize on their success. When the movie came out, it brought in fresh filming techniques that ingeniously melded the comic book style into its DNA, and inspired other productions to do the same. You can see the latest One Piece adaptation as a key example of drawing direct inspiration from it. As for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, it goes a step further by embracing its zany, out-of-pocket, and countercultural pizzazz to shift the dynamic set by its predecessors and be its own thing. An anime inspired by things like Fooly Cooly or just Studio Trigger properties in general. And be just a creative Hail Mary where people battle in the film reels residing in a video store, or battle an army of ninja paparazzi with the power of Tony Hawk's Skater Pro button combos. It's the perfect combination of anime and crack cocaine, and I fucking love it.
They're ruining my movie. I'm taking my 15.
It kind of makes me wish deep inside that the series was just more than 8 episodes, so that we can just enjoy what Ramona and the gang will get up to next, which is just emblematic of how well these characters are just written. Yet with all this modern tooling the writers had in making the show, it makes it more than worth it by tackling on one of the most misused aspects, in my opinion. It's cheerleaders and losers. Now, if you're a big Chrono Trigger fan, chances are you know that around the halfway point of the game, the main hero gets killed off and the side characters have to find a way to bring him back. However, while Scott Pilgrim Takes Off does have kind of brief connections to that particular moment in Chrono, I wouldn't really say it's all that uncommon for your main hero to just waltz up and disappear. However, while researching for this video about the latest Netflix anime, I came across one of the more interesting themes of Chrono Trigger being existentialism. The motif of altered identity is one of the key existentialist statements of Chrono Trigger. We find that identity is never immutable. Characters may change profoundly as a result of events in their lives or to achieve some goal. Yet even their new forms always contain some seed of the old. The show exists as a what-if scenario on what would happen if the events of the original comic never took place, and the characters have to exist without the titular protagonist. Where would they go and what would change about them? Would Envy still be the entitled Regina George who asked for too much out of people? Would Knife Chow let go of her crush on Scott? Would young Neil not be the chillest bro around? Aside from that last untrue statement, Neil will always be the coolest. The side characters have a lot more going for them in this series than they did in the comics. Sex Bob-omb is the glue that holds the band slightly together and serves as connective tissue to all of their grievances. It's the closest thing to camaraderie they have, and Scott not being there seems to throw them out of whack. However, in the absence of Scott Pilgrim, great title for a video, it turns out pretty great. If only for a brief moment they find more about themselves, like Knives and her musical ability, or Julie's kindred nature with former Huge Dick but not really former Gideon Gordon Goose. This is even prevalent in a lot of Scott Pilgrim material, from the film justifying Sex Bob-omb's brief stint in the spotlight at Gideon's new nightclub, or even in the comic's final issue. The band breaks up with many of them dabbling in new pastimes that are furthering their careers. It's not that they've completely changed though. Steven is still a bit of a neurotic, Neil's got that naive outlook on life, and Kim has a rough pattern of dating dumbasses. However, they're at a better point in their life compared to their old ones. In the animated series, Scott and Knives become music producers, Kim ditches her job as a VHS video clerk, and Neil doesn't change, but he's just kind of riding the wave of life at this moment, so never stop being you, dude. It's kind of like the evolution of Crash and the Boys, becoming the boys in Crash in the comics. They're dorks and they know it, now listen to their sick beats. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is literally in the title, and thus we experience a new perspective surrounding our goofy 20-somethings being a part of movies or becoming CEOs like with Wallace or Matthew Patel, and how, again, in the absence of Scott Pilgrim, they are becoming better people, in a conceited understanding.
Hey, you could always wish upon a star. The star being me.
The thing about Scott Pilgrim's side characters is that they've always been jaded and credulous as Scott is, but they're just able to read a room much better. Yet that's what being a mid-20s adult is, and that is doubly so now when you live in a metropolitan city like Toronto, and how very real it is to live life the way you want. Although I'm jealous that one of them can live in a nice house like this with a barista position plus tips in 2005. Unlike now. The fun of Scott Pilgrim comes from a septet of bull-headed freaks, geeks, and vegans pummeling our hero into guacamole. Yet in terms of characterization, not a whole lot is explored with them. We know of their history. Ramona is the one girl who's never the dumpy. Yet we know little about what they are as everyday people. The anime explores this unknown side and highlights more of why they are this way to begin with. A group gathered by a singular life goal from a Craigslist ad can only spell disaster when the main objective is MIA.
What are you doing? I won! That means you and I are free to get back together. Right?
And thus we have the fracture of the organization and all the members having to coordinate their lives in new outfits. Matthew Patel, the first Evil X who's notable in the series for being the rare non-white character to get punched into coins, has more to do here than in his previous incarnations. He fights Gideon for the position of chief executive officer of his company, and actually succeeds in the takeover. Yet his penchant for the spectacle and showmanship doesn't fit right in the rigid system of administration. So he essentially burns money and resources based on his habits, and would much rather be a Broadway hit than on Wall Street's shit list. So he's more than happy to give Gordon the company back when his Scott Pilgrim musical gets roadshow success. Lucas Lee is thrust from his lavish Hollywood livelihood onto the streets, as controversies and poor movie performances blacklists him from acting. Penniless and in need of a career change, his ego takes him through the course of the show from the heights of being a couch surfer to a barista and a speedrun that makes full use of his skater bro attitude. And that's not just from a performance angle.
You are one mistake away from movie jail.
Good thing I've got a get out of jail free card. This smile.
I always found Lucas Lee to be my underrated favorite of the 7 Evil X's, as he always seemed like a guy who's least interested in Ramona's life and would gladly just do his own thing and leave petty shit like that in the past.
What's up? How's life? He seems nice.
Although the series obviously just used kind of the Chris Evans interpretation, unlike the comics, who's just kind of more of a chill but corporate sellout. Not everyone gets this level of depth to their characters though. There are some that have less meat, while one has a significant boost, but we'll get to who after the rest. Todd has always been the most popular ex-boyfriend for Scott the Face, a pompous and deeply flawed bad boy who doesn't give two shits about what he wants to do and will actively hurt lover and foe alike because of his selfishness. He still has that pettiness when he gets too into doing lines in Wallace's trailer during the Scott Pilgrim movie production.
So quick question about the script.
Run lines in your trailer?
I am not gay. I have relationships with women and sex with men.
He breaks off with Envy, gets a tattoo of Wallace on his chest, and gives up the vegan lifestyle for good old-fashioned Canadian buckets of poutine. Unlike the comic strip and movie, where his nonchalant invasion of personal responsibility is his undoing.
On April 4th, 7:30 p.m., you partook a plate of chicken parmesan.
Chicken isn't vegan?
This is played more for a rock star who acts like a lovesick puppy, and my feelings are a bit iffy on it. What's more iffy though is Gordon, and I think it's more to do with what he is as a man without the power or the money. Gideon is a huge dickhead who serves as Scott's biggest obstacle in that he is always rather vain in his views on women, and sees them as more ornaments to his collection. He even put all of his love interests over the years in hibernation just because he can't value the thought of free will. It's also the reason why his hold on Ramona is present throughout the series and feels like the only ex who totally deserves the breakup. Yet in the series, Gordon has lost everything that made him, seemingly losing his narcissistic tendencies, and falters into being just a couch potato with no ambitious goals in life. He wants friendship most importantly, yet can only find true meaning again once he is in the big chair, which doesn't bother his new girlfriend Julie, who doesn't care less and makes these two maybe a match made in hell.
Now clean my f***ing house, Gordon!
Right away!
Now, on one hand, it's good to showcase the man behind the suit for what he truly is, and Ramona doesn't let him off the hook for all the f***ed up shit he did to her emotionally.
And you, stop being a loser and treat Julie better than you treated me.
However, during a sequence in which Ramona takes recompense in her brutal decisions that hurt the people she loves, Gideon appears in it, and I don't know, it kind of comes off as a bit blasé. This is the same guy who implanted a chip behind his girlfriend's skull in the movie and has been canonically pronounced as a dick in various comic panels, so I don't find his inclusion to be all that satisfying. I do think it's more a product of two different adaptations clashing in the general preconception of the villain that was Gideon, and that can so easily confuse a lot of longtime fans.
Scotty, that evil villain stuff is behind me. I've got jewels now.
We're just here to watch the show, you psychomaniac.
The Katiyanaka twins, meanwhile, don't have much to do here, and I feel are the ones with missed opportunities. They more play as side hustle in the greater twist reveal, yet their inclusion feels largely muted, making the comic version of them feel like the only time they were given any character. Which leaves us with the only Evil X that I was most impressed with, and that was Roxy. Feeling like it comes as quite a cultural shift to see Roxy being this one joke, just a phase rage monkey, to actually having legitimate motivation to be an eye-opener. Scott Pilgrim has always been quite friendly to the LGBTQ+ culture, especially since gay marriage and acceptance in Canada was legalized in 2005, yet it still has its own obvious hurdles. The inclusion of a female Evil X as a joke for Ramona's confused sexuality, as well as the many dated jokes that was clearly written by a straight guy, are now seen as pretty disingenuous.
You and her? It was just a phase.
Just a phase?
You had a sexy phase? It meant nothing. I didn't think it would count.
It meant nothing?
I was just a little bi-curious.
Something I reckon O'Malley had good foresight into correcting by going into Roxy's perspective and coming off as easily the ex who got the harshest treatment. Roxy feels the most heartbroken by not just Ramona breaking it off, but also because it was done in a very callous way.
You made me feel like nothing. You were afraid. Good for you. All I wanted was for you to see me.
It seemed that Roxy finally coming out and finding someone who seemed to understand her to be all the more tragic when Ramona's worst tendencies come loose. So her aggression and depressing patterns can finally be understood, and because of the fight that ensues, we understand who she is and why she does the things she does. The show truly takes advantage of placing these antagonists into more supplementary roles that gives layers that are past one-dimensional drawings. From their interactions with each other and other characters, we see more of the humanity behind them, and that means they can also synchronize well with other people. I guess one fun thing that could be a make or break deal with people who maybe aren't familiar with the source material is that some of the voice acting is a bit of a catch-all. Sure, you got actors who can do circles in the booth since they actually perform as voice actors before, like Mae Whitman and Aubrey Plaza.
I don't need a league to get a girl. Have a nice life, loser.
Be back in a bit, baby.
Okay, bye. I'll miss you.
I'll miss you fucking more.
Well, folks like Chris Evans and Johnny Simmons are just kind of having fun with it.
You get an explosion.
You do? That's dangerous. Why are we mixing volatile chemicals on a movie set in the first place?
You're on a quest to find a guy who was dating a high schooler. I'd never do anything that stupid. If I did, my career would be over.
So when the main villains have their own life-altering adventures to go on, where does that leave Ramona? That brings us to the most significant change, and this one's got a lot of baggage.
My God.
Okay, I didn't want to bring this up, but we gotta do it, so here we go. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl is a character archetype penned by film critic Nathan Rabin, based on his observations from the movie Elizabethtown starring Kirsten Dunst. As he puts it, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach brilliantly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl is an all-or-nothing proposition. This has also been coined in connection to several films of various genres that center around a male protagonist being guided by a female angel who seems to stand out from the crowd. You can see this in classic films like Breakfast at Tiffany's or Butterflies or Free, and films like Garden State or Vanilla Sky. And you have your kind of crowd of anti-MPDG films like Annie Hall, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and maybe Silver Linings Playbook, but it's a bit complicated, however. There's even the line in Eternal Sunshine that speaks out this point clearly.
Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm gonna make them alive. I'm just a f***ed up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours.
If you want a different perspective on this issue, here are some videos you can watch on your own time when it comes to MPTG and its problematic issues, because I can only give you my honest opinion as just some guy. And yes, context matters, yet I also see it as something that gained attraction in the later 2000s and suddenly just vanished by efforts to correct that stigma. especially because of its implications that we're putting forward towards assumed gender bias in mental health and treatment. It's something that we unfortunately haven't gotten better at. Ramona Flowers is another one of those complicated characters to add to that, since there are things from one angle that do paint her as just like the others. Her involvement in the film version seems to shift from being the inciting incident to the reward for Scott Pilgrim by the film's end, which was originally going to have Scott and Knives get back together, but yeah, that wouldn't have looked good either way. It would have been better if he maybe never got either girl. I'm just saying.
I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
However, it works better in the comic book format as it gets to the root of Ramona's problems very thoroughly, and her relationship with Scott is written a lot stronger there. It's sadly one aspect of the movie on rewatch that hasn't aged well, and yes, you can make a sound argument with that she was following a long line of writing tropes that were growing ire from certain groups. The term has since been thrown to the ringer of popular discourse and eventually became just another lazy shorthand for writers to blurt out in conversation. Monika Bartyzel wrote about it in her article titled "Why It's Time to Retire the Term Manic Pixie Dream Girl." She said, "Manic Pixie Dream Girl once had its place as a clever way to describe female characters that were all quirk and no depth, existing solely for the benefit of a broody male lead. But now it's a term more damaging than it is helpful. Manic Pixie Dream Girl distracts us from the real problems of superficial female characters, and it inspires real-life women to question the validity and worth of each other's interests. And when a term has outlived its usefulness and become a part of the very marginalized trend that it was designed to rally against, it's time to put it to rest for good." So when I look at Ramona Flowers in this latest adaptation and her becoming the main star, I see it as a means of correcting a mistake and not giving her enough urgency in the 2010 film, turning her from the one who runs away from her past mistakes to the one who's solving her past mistakes. The resolution she comes to is that there should be no fear in owning up to bad things you've done, and that you should accept who you are. There's a scene in episode 3 that sees Ramona talking with Kim in the video store about her first and only date with Scott, mentioning how it had sparks.
You like him, don't you?
There were sparks.
Ugh. You're in trouble.
Why does this always happen to me?
For the first time, she has to watch as someone else leaves her before the relationship even begins, and that really hits it home for her. Now, she has to reconcile with the people she's dealt heavy hits to, like Lucas, Roxy, or the Katianaka twins. It reinforces the fact that she has some involvement in turning them into the people they are today. However, since they're just as guilty as her, she has to be the bigger person and get them back on the right path again. Another plus to her being the main character is that we get to see her being a more active one, getting involved with kooky nonsense like stunt work, where she has to act like a straight-faced detective who has to balance herself amongst a sea of millennials and Gen Z affluent balderdash.
When you're done up there, I've got another stunt for you. I need you to run over to my hotel room and give my dog some medication.
Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is more about acceptance, and Ramona has a key role in how she dictates her life, and that is something that the main villain, older Scott, never got over. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off feels more like an Americanized Fate Unlimited Blade Works, considering you have the older version of the main protagonist trying to change the fate of his past self, and if you don't get the reference, then you maybe don't like Scott Pilgrim. Yet if there is something you gotta hate, it's gotta be Scott's biggest problem bursting out in front of him: being f***ing dumb. Older Scott takes younger Scott to the future, and unfortunately, there are no jetpacks.
Did you really see a future with this girl?
Like, with jetpacks?
Instead, he sees a version of Scott that is single, practically homeless, and still sponging off his gay roommates who is married to some guy who works at Nintendo.
Where they make the video games?
Yes.
Does he get every game for free?
Yes.
He doesn't. That's not true.
It's true.
If there is anything that older Scott has over his youthful self, is his obsession with video games. He even has a virtual boy that plays an anniversary video meant to woo his former lover. There's basically no doubt he has abandonment issues that haven't been addressed, and he dedicates to better his future by ignoring the problem in his face. The thing that Scott Pilgrim has always addressed, and that includes O'Malley, is that his own competence is his downfall. Sometimes it can be endearing, comical even, yet how Scott proves time and time again is that he fragments his friendships and companionships with cognitive dissonance. Like that time he quote-unquote fought for Kim Pine's affection against an entire army of high school prep students, only for it to be revealed as him just punching Kim's boyfriend in a heated shuffle. Or how he thought squeaking by age of consent laws to get over his breakup with Envy would make him any less pathetic.
Apparently a 23-year-old dating a high schooler is frowned upon by society.
Obviously, his density gets him into a plethora of bad decision-makings, yet for a comedy/adventure comic, it only helps him overcome it all and gets him his happily ever after. At least he thinks so. But once he's not a young man anymore, he has to grow up. And he doesn't. He's become so preoccupied in his past escapades that he isn't willing to listen to the rotation of his trajectory, and he suddenly loses it. Now he feels inside that life would be better if only Ramona never met him. He tarnishes any development he made and is thus misshapen to a Street Fighter final boss that wants to change the timeline and stay as a man-child he always has been. Because of this turn of events, it actually helps younger Scott understand a little bit more about himself, what he needs to do to change. And that's just to be smarter. Actively spinning your hamster wheel in the same lifestyle day on end doesn't get you anywhere in life. And the simple change can better yourself. Despite the cries of fans not getting the adaptation they've expected, I do think it's a better alternative.
Me? I'm a good guy! I've been living like a friggin' monk!
Is that what we're calling it? Or is it just that you haven't been outside in 10 years?
Not a problematic character, but a dumb 23-year-old who is finally growing up. His development into someone who lets change happen is the crux of his progression, and seeing him finally realize that it's a lot more satisfying than just a brief tussle with his evil counterpart in the comics, or his climactic fight against Gideon. It has, and always will be, a story about becoming a competent adult. Which, to be fair, is maybe why this Netflix show actually succeeds better than all other adaptations. Bryan Lee O'Malley is a pretty humble creator, all things considered, and despite the vested urges to repeat what isn't broke, decides to go completely off the track with this one. That's due to the fact that when he wrote Scott Pilgrim, he was in his mid-20s. Now, he's in his 40s. And I do think that the show is a reflection of what he feels he wants to expand on. Not just Scott, but maybe every significant character in his catalog. Around March of 2010, the trailer came out and my life was changed. Forever, my life became meta. Because Scott Pilgrim exists in pop culture, I can't really look at pop culture the same way I did when I was younger. I'm part of it. So I wanted to draw the audience into my world, where Scott Pilgrim exists and messes with my life. You know, in a lot of weird ways. I absolutely love the strange world of Scott Pilgrim's Canadian antics in the Toronto area, and deep down wish to see it fully come to the small screen. It's got the tools at its disposal, and it's mainly part of a lot of people's id to give baby its bottle. Yet, as I slowly touch the edges of my big 3.0 phase of my life, not there yet, but I am reaching it, it's good as time as any to reflect about what we were to what we are now. Are we like older Scott and just pining for that same wish fulfillment that we had when we were 20? Or are we just being dumb? Are we restricting our own limitations and not seeing friendships or romances because we felt the pain of going through loss and don't want to go through that again? Whatever, life's life, and the Scott Pilgrim could just as easily be an escape to a dimensional paradise where everyone is young and beautiful. Like a video game. Yet eventually, we gotta go back to the real world here. Because the year is 2023. Joe Biden is losing popularity in office, Israel is targeting Palestinians and further extending their apartheid agenda, the Texas Rangers won their first World Series since 1961, and Elon Musk has turned Twitter into a lame X symbol.
Go yourself. Is that clear?
We aren't as naive or passive as we once were, and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off basically tells us that. Beneath a circus of stimulating animation, character progression, and laugh-out-loud comedy antics lies the crux of what makes it so damn good. It's relatably harsh, and a firmer reminder that we all need a reality check once in a while. So if you still haven't watched Scott Pilgrim on Netflix and have qualms against not seeing what you think will make you happy, may I suggest taking a deeper look through some rusty Nintendo plastic accessory and finding out what truly matters in life. Or just don't, whatever. Stop being children.
Oh, well, this is great. Not
Thanks for watching, and tell me your thoughts on Scott Pilgrim Takes Off down below in the comments section. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, hit that notification button to never miss an upload, and if you want the uncut version of this video, check it out on my Patreon by becoming a patron. It's your bra man, dipping into some good old-fashioned Canadian poutine.